Welcome into 247 Sports on the road in Houston, as you can see behind us. I'm 247 Sports Director Scouting Adam Finkelstein. I'm joined by National Basketball Director Eric Bossi and National Recruiting Analyst Travis Branham. We are going to be here with you live for the next 4 days, including the next 90 minutes, and we've got a ton of things on the slate. We're going to have live guests. Obviously, we are going to preview and react to all the action this week here in Houston. We're going to talk about next college basketball season, the upcoming NBA draft. We're even going to have live commitments. So, without further ado, fellas, we got 4 teams still in the mix here for the Final Four, and we're going to break down just exactly how they built up their rosters. Now, we're going to go through one at a time. Travis, I'm going to start with you. Miami, the team to come out of the ACC. Coach Lonergan, everybody's favorite grandfather. How did they build this roster? And you can't start with NIL.
Have to, because they were the biggest story of last offseason. The transfer portal was obviously popping off, but theirs played out more public than anybody else, obviously first starting with Nigel Pack. Kansas State transfer, averaging nearly 20 points a game in his season. Comes out and commits to Kansas State, and within a minute there's an NIL deal already announced in Miami, and that obviously made massive waves on social media. And the bigger story came after that, where Isaiah Wong said, you know what, I'm going to put my name into the transfer portal, inherently raising the price and value of his own name. So he obviously ended up coming back. We can assume that he probably made a good chunk of change this season. And he's been their star. Nigel Pack, to me, is their X factor, but the heart and soul of this team is Isaiah Wong. And frankly, he doesn't get enough credit as an NBA draft prospect, in my opinion. He's long, he's athletic, he's really tough, he's an absolute blur in the open court, can create at will, also gets his teammates involved. When things hit the fan for this team, look for him to show up in these games, especially starting tomorrow. And then Nigel Pack, again, the X factor, guy who can really make shots on the perimeter. We've seen it all season long. He's been a bit inconsistent. There are games he has gone really quiet, but when he is at his best and spacing the floor, things really open up for this Miami team. So this team was really built in the transfer portal, and can't fail to mention Norchad Omier. Right. Absolute monster on the glass, kid out of Arkansas State. Just big physical specimen. Gets on the glass, runs the floor, does everything you need him to do. Just a workhorse. And he plays, the 5 for them, and it's a roster that they play small. They play with a lot of freedom. They play with a lot of spacing, which I think is ideal for Isaiah Wong. They're kind of like the team that they're just out here balling, to be frank. And it's not a lot of intricate sets, but there's concepts. And in my mind, it's Omier who also, Pack was the one who was so public coming out of the portal last year. But I almost think that Omier is the one who they can't do without. They're in the Final Four now, but first week of the season, they were like that popular upset choice because nobody was sure if Omier was going to play. Coach Larinaga said, he's a game-time decision. We'll see. We're about to go on the court. We'll find out. I mean, if he's not playing, they're not nearly the team they are in the Final Four. And I think for UConn, and we'll get into the matchups later, but I think for UConn, attacking him and maybe getting him into foul trouble like they did Drew Timme is going to be crucial for them. Anybody else you want to talk about in this roster breakdown before we move on? I think you actually just nailed it for the most part. Like you said, they just come out and hoop. And we saw that in Texas. Sometimes it bites you in the butt and you find yourself down 15 points. But the fact is they never go away. They always remain confident. They're always going to have their foot on the gas pedal, and they can come back in those situations. So, but Norchad, if you get him in foul trouble in this UConn game, they're going to be in big trouble.
Right. If I could for a second before we move on, one of the big things that happened last year where they played Kansas in the Elite 8 round, they got hit with that flurry, and they were never able to bounce back from it, right? This year, they get hit with the flurry by Texas, and they're there. And I think another guy we need to talk about with them is Jordan Miller, who is another transfer. But, he's in his second year of the program. Him and Wong are that glue, and they're those guys that they can turn to. And really, they've got – I wrote an article about it earlier in the year, but they've got arguably the best group of perimeter players in the country. Now, is it super deep? No. But they got 3 guys who can go out and get them 25 on any given night. And there's not many teams in the tournament that have that.
And you know what people forget about Miller is in last year's NCAA tournament, Jabari Smith on Auburn, he was all the hype. Jordan Miller shut him down on the defensive end of the floor. So his versatility as kind of this mismatch forward, plays on the perimeter, really important to them. All right, Ibas, going to go back to you. San Diego State, I know you've been doing your research. How did they build this team?
Yeah, San Diego State, I think we need to start with where they were back in 2020 when they finished the COVID season, number 4 in the net, number 6 in the AP poll. They had a chance to really go out and make some things happen, right? But we're a little bit disrespected. We did a poll of 115 college coaches, and not a single one of them picked them to win the national championship that year. Now here we are, 2023. They're here. They're in the Final Four, an unexpected pick. You know, they dominated the Mountain West Conference, going 15-3. They won the conference tournament. Then they went out in the NCAA tournament, had a tough game in the first round against Charleston, cruised against Furman, overcame a 9-point deficit in the last 11 and a half minutes when it looked like they were going to crumble against Alabama, held Brandon Miller, everyone's favorite freshman, to 3 for 19 from the field. And then in the Elite Eight, they beat Creighton. You know, they were down not as deep, 7 points, with a little bit more time left, but they really imposed their will, and that's what they do. This team is built in the transfer portal. Their leading scorer is Matt Bradley. He's the only guy who's in double figures for the team. But then they've got a group of 5-6 guys that are all right in that thing. Darian Trammell is another transfer, comes from Seattle, grad transfer. Jadon Ledee, their big guy. He's been to Ohio State and TCU. Micah Parrish, their best shooter. He came out of Oakland out of the transfer portal. And then, you know, they've got tough California guys. Lamont Butler is kind of the heart and soul of that team. He's a warrior. He's from the Inland Empire area. Keshad Johnson is from up in the Bay. And then you've got Nathan Mensah, who's from Ghana, but played his high school basketball at Prolific Prep. They've got a formula. They've got older guys. They've got guys who have had a lot of experience. And they've got guys who know what the program is all about. And you see what's happened during this NCAA tournament.
And his coach says defense travels. All right, I will talk about UConn. You know, it's been interesting. I'm obviously based out of the Northeast, so I've got a front row seat for the way Dan Hurley's built it. And I would say it's been linear. You know, every year they seem to add something new. What's interesting to me about the program is that it really took over in a place where it needed to be rebuilt. So every year it seemed like they crossed off another barrier. You saw them expand the scope of their geographic recruiting blueprint. You see some of the accolades there, but you know, starting out in the Northeast, establishing themselves in the New England prep market, then going into New York and Philly, then all the way down into the DMV. And you know who was the first recruit they got out of the DMV? It was Jordan Hawkins. So that right now is paying dividends. So you saw them expand their recruiting profile. This past year, we saw them go back and get out to Seattle, get down to Atlanta. So now they're doing some recruiting nationally like they did under Jim Calhoun. And when you look at this roster, people forget Adama Sanogo. He came out of high school a year early. Now he's only in his third year of college. And to me, you know, remember, this was supposed to be the year of the big man in college basketball. Well, a lot of those big men failed to live up to the hype, or at least their teams did come postseason. Adama Sanogo is the only one left standing. Just really improved his skill set. And while things tend to start with Jordan Hawkins, Sanogo is no less important to this team. Then you got to talk about Andre Jackson, too, because he's one of the ultimate connectors in college basketball and just an absolutely elite athlete. And then, last but not least, Donovan Clingan, the local Connecticut prospect. Listen, I saw Donovan Clingan a lot in high school, and to say that he has changed his body in the not even a year since he's been on UConn's campus, the work that they did to get him in shape over the summer is paying off tenfold, because now people are talking about what advantage he has as a rim runner. And this is a guy who I had like real concerns about whether or not he was going to be able to keep up with the flow of the game. And if you look at his efficiency numbers this season, in particular in this NCAA tournament, they're off the charts. So to me, those two guys, Sanogo and Clingan, are the best big man combination in college basketball. You guys got anything to add on the Huskies?
Yeah, Adam, I'd like to get from your perspective. They had that stretch during the season where it seemed like when they played against teams that maybe weren't quite on their level, they would just run them out of the gym. But anytime they played another team that was, you know, could match up with them, you know, a top 25 team, a top 30 team, they were struggling with them. You know, they couldn't win a big game. What do you think changed for them in the NCAA tournament that's allowed them to make this run and beat all these teams they've beaten?
Well, see, this is part of the thing that I think is a little concerning if you're a UConn fan. This year, this team has been better when they are the hunter, not the hunted. And this weekend in Houston, they are now the hunted. So it's a different perspective. The other thing they struggled with at times during the game was defensive pressure. We're going to get into all this later, but this is a team without a prototypical point guard. Andre Jackson handles a lot of the facilitating responsibilities. So when you have a team that really gets up in them, pressures them, and doesn't allow them to run their stuff, they've struggled with that. That's why they, in my mind, that was part of the reason why they lost to St. John's in the regular season. All right.
I'll add to that real quick.
Yeah.
Miami likes the pressure.
Yeah.
And we saw that, honestly, on full display when they played Duke earlier in the season. Duke coming off the North Carolina win. Tyrese Proctor, you had a freshman point guard, you had Jeremy Roach, who's an older guy, but they absolutely ran them out of the gym. And so without a true point guard on this UConn team, we've talked about Norchad Omier if he gets in foul trouble. Likewise, on the other spectrum, if they really pressure these UConn guards, they could be in big trouble.
100%. We are talking roster construction. We're on the road in Houston. We are presented by Ford, built Ford tough. And now the last team in the Final Four, not least, but last, Florida Atlantic. Who had them in their bracket? I actually have a friend who claims they had Florida Atlantic in their bracket.
Yeah, I've got a friend who claimed it too, but he works for the university, so he doesn't count.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. All right, so we're going to talk Florida Atlantic, and it's a little bit of a group discussion here. But this is a team that nobody expected would be here. And when it comes to roster construction, let me say this. If you were a mid-major program trying to emulate what Florida Atlantic did, and I'll open this up to both of you, is there something that you can take from the way they got here, or is this just something that really can't be duplicated?
I'll go ahead and take that. I think it's something that you can look at what they did. They've recruited young, unlike a lot of mid-majors. They're not as transfer heavy as some of the others. You know, their third leading scorer, Vlad Golden, is a transfer, was at Texas Tech. But John L. Davis, Elijah Martin, Michael Forrest, these guys are dudes that have been in the program for a long time, and they've grown. And I think while the surprise is that they're here, if you saw what they did during the regular season, we had the graphic up there earlier, 18-2 in Conference USA, which is a much tougher conference than I think people realize. But they've just built this program now, and they're rolling, and they've got a good crew that's going to be back next year for the most part. And, you know, they just feel comfortable with what they're doing, and it's come together organically. So to duplicate that is going to be hard, but what a mid-major school is going to have to do is be committed to letting some younger guys grow and develop within the program rather than just taking old guys. They've established a culture, and I think that's what's been the key to their success.
So in this day and age, I think it comes down as much to retention as it does to recruitment. I mean, you get some key additions there. You know, Nick Boyd didn't have a Division I scholarship offer out of high school. He had to go to prep school to get a scholarship offer. I remember Vlad Golden saw him in prep school. He used to remind me of Caleb Tarczewski. You remember? You must remember Caleb Tarczewski.
Yeah, I remember Caleb Tarczewski.
Vlad Golden, I was like, this guy's Caleb Tarczewski too. Went to Texas Tech initially. Chris Beard didn't work out, obviously. Came back here, but now they're here. Trav, what are your thoughts on FAU?
Just the continuity thing that you were just mentioning. There's clearly a bunch of ways to skin a cat in building a roster in today's day and age. You see it on one extreme with Miami, also UConn, and you see it to a different extreme. And I think they're looking a little bit more like a Purdue. Purdue had tremendous amount of success. Obviously, they took that early exit. But Purdue is one that has always continued to retain talent. And with the way the Florida Atlantic has done it, that's, I think, is going to be more valued moving forward for teams across the country. Keeping players and having kids that are familiar with the program, familiar with the coach, what they want, you learn how to manipulate different things in the schemes of the game. And so that's really paid dividends for them. I think we're going to see it pick up.
I think another thing that we have to mention in all of this is evaluation and the staff getting out and doing their homework. It takes somebody to find these guys, right? And Dusty May and his staff, they went out, they found guys in Indiana, they found guys in Tennessee, they found guys in Florida, obviously, you know, a little bit of the portal action, but their portal guys are Florida natives, or at least Greenlee is. But, you know, it's just, that's a staff that knows what works for them, knows what works in their system, and they've stayed and they've plugged along, and they took some lumps along the way, but here they are, and the dividends are incredible. You know, they've gone from someone who nobody could ever dreamed winning a national championship. You see the graphic we just had up, now they're 14-1 to win a national championship. Like, it's just amazing what they've done.
No, it absolutely is. All right, now we are going to turn the page a little bit, but we're going to stay on FAU. Now we're going to talk about the top players on each team. And, of course, we are on the road in Houston. This is presented by Ford, built Ford tough. Another guy who's tough, Indiana native John L. Davis at FAU. I mean, that game he had earlier this season, the first player in NCAA history, let me see if I get this right, 25 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, 5 steals, I believe was the mark. I mean, it was absolutely incredible. And again, this is a 6'4" wing who, in my mind, is the toughest cover on this FAU team. Now, keep in mind, FAU is a group that likes to shoot three-point shots. What's ironic about their run here to Houston is they haven't even shot the ball as well as they typically do. Davis is someone that I think really thrives in that spacing because he can score in so many different ways, so he provides a matchup problem. This is someone who can drive the ball left, he can drive the ball right, he can play out of the mid-post, he averages over a made 3 per game. He's got really good poise inside the lane too, so he, to me, is the star player to watch for Florida Atlantic. They can beat you with different guys on different days, but certainly John L. Davis is the one who has risen the bar the most. We're going to go now to San Diego State. Ibas, who do you like?
San Diego State is interesting because they don't really have a standout scorer. Matt Bradley is the guy who leads them in scoring at about 12.5 per game. But I'm going to go with Darian Trammell. He's not a high efficiency guy. He's not the biggest guy. The grad transfer from Seattle at 5'10", 160 nothing pounds. But just something about the way that guy plays and the way he makes things go. It just seems like when the game is on the line, he's the guy that if you need someone to go make a play, he's the guy who's got the juice. He's the guy who can go make something happen off the dribble. He's the guy who's going to take it upon himself to go and make something happen. And you need that guy when it happens. You saw he stepped up. I think the hardest thing in the world to do is to not only make a pressure free throw, but make a pressure free throw after you already missed one. Him stepping up and making that second free throw in the Elite Eight against Creighton with under 2 seconds to go in the game to send them to the Final Four was a huge play. And so that makes me, to him, he's the key for them.
You know what's interesting, and Trav, please feel free to jump in on this. You look at the numbers he put up at Seattle. I mean, he was stuffing the stat sheet. 20-plus points, nearly 5 assists, nearly 5 rebounds, coming up with almost 3 steals per game. The other thing he did, though, his turnovers were off the charts at Seattle. So you look at what he's done here at San Diego State. Sure, he doesn't have the same volume to put up the same numbers, but his efficiency, to your point, has gotten so much better. He's taking care of the basketball, and the defensive playmaking has really been a good fit with what San Diego does. San Diego State.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, they've got, 1, 2, 3? They've got like 8 guys who average between 12.5 points and 6.1 points per game, so there's not a lot of room to be that guy who's coming out there and doing the scoring.
And there's less possessions, right? Because they just grind out.
There's less possessions. Yeah, they make you grind. They really get after you on that defensive end. And I think it kind of stems from him. And on any night that can change, but I think right now he's the kind of guy who they're leaning to and who they're feeding off. So like I said, that makes him the key.
All right, now, this is normally the time where we would go to Travis, but as you can see, we've got the breaking news guy over there. So when he starts typing, we adapt because he's breaking some news. Let's see if he can do it with one hand holding the mic.
Trying to.
Instead,
but it's actually something we probably want to talk about. Hunter Dickinson has officially hit the portal.
Who?
Hunter Dickinson.
All right, so we've got breaking news here on the road in Houston, presented by Ford. Ford Tough. How tough do we think Hunter Dickinson is? No, I'm just kidding. Hunter Dickinson is in the portal.
Hunter Dickinson is.
You want to finish writing that?
We'll finish writing.
All right. So Hunter Dickinson, obviously, he had just recently tweeted that he was back for another. You know what's fascinating to me about Hunter Dickinson? I got a great Hunter Dickinson story. I was once interviewing Hunter Dickinson live TV against Evan Mobley. I said to him, "Hey Hunter, you're just playing against the number 1 player in the country. You did really well. What'd you think?" He said, "I'm the number 1 player in the country." Good talk, Hunter. What are your thoughts about Hunter Dickinson leaving Michigan?
I mean, it's a bombshell for sure. We thought if he would have left to say, "Hey, I've done all I can prove in college. It's time to go on to the NBA level." That's understandable, right? But to see him hit that transfer portal, and I'm sure NIL dollars.
Jet Howard's on the way out. Kobe Buffkin is suddenly like a trendy NBA prospect.
This totally changes Michigan and their season and what they have to do with things. And now, Juwan Howard, he's either going to have to scramble to hope they can come up with an NIL package to keep him around, or figure out what is it that we can do to get this guy to stay. Because for him to hit now, I would guess that he's pretty certain that he's leaving, especially after already saying, "Hey, I'm back." So this is some major news, and really something that we're going to have to pivot for if you're a Michigan fan or you're a Michigan staff, and try and figure out. Now, the portal's still ongoing. There's still stuff out there, but as we know, 1 week in the portal is like a month, 2 months in regular recruiting. So
once you hit the portal, you've already explored your options. The portal's just kind of like signing the paperwork. But while Travis goes and breaks news here, we're going to talk about UConn. The star there, Jordan Hawkins. We talked about Adamo Sanogo a lot. They're really, in my mind, 1A and 1B. But things really start with Hawkins. I think UConn's offense is predicated first and foremost on running him off of screens and trying to establish him as a shot maker. One of the things that's been interesting in this NCAA tournament is the fact that he's been cold in the opening half on 2 different occasions, most notably the opening game of the tournament against Iona. Now, coming out of halftime, Danny Hurley runs a play for him. He knocks down a 3 and gets fouled. 4-point play. Suddenly he erupts in the second half. So to me, Jordan Hawkins is the most dynamic shooter left in the tournament. You see he's the team's second leading scorer behind Adama Sanogo. First team All Big East. Third most threes in a single NCAA tournament in UConn history. And they've had some shooters there, namely somebody named Ray Allen. The other thing I'll add to that is this was a prospect who, coming into the season, Danny Hurley said had a chance to play his way into the first round. I think he solidified that stock coming into the tournament. Right now, he's knocking on the lottery door because the type of shots he's making right now, these are pro shots he's making. I mean, it's one of those that's like, is that a good shot? Good shot, because it goes in. He's making some big-time shots.
Yeah, no doubt. He's really opened some eyes with what he's been doing during the NCAA tournament. Like you say, that shot making is take away that shot making from them and what's going to happen to them with it. So, of course, he's the key for them.
All right, Trav,
we're back now.
You're back.
Sorry,
we're back.
Yeah.
This is live. This is live, folks. All right, so we want to talk about now Miami, Isaiah Wong. Here's my question for you. How much of this is just like an elite fit because of the spacing and because of the freedom that Miami provides? That to me is just, and what's interesting is Danny Hurley was in his press conference the other day was talking about how UConn recruited Isaiah Wong. They envisioned teaming him with Bouknight. I think Miami's been an almost ideal fit for him, but what should fans watch for this week?
Just his dynamic ability to just make plays happen. Again, when the game slows down, it happens every year in March. Late into the game, tight game slows down, and getting into your offense and getting things run, everybody is so well scouted at this point that sometimes you just have to give the ball to somebody and let them go make a play. And that's where these stars are always born. And that guy for Miami, they have a variety of weapons, but it's Isaiah Wong. Nobody can keep him in front, it seems, especially his ability to get downhill. He's got a great burst of speed, and then just that knack to put the ball in the hole. I remember when they recruited Isaiah Wong 3-4 years ago, and how high they were on him. I think nationally ranked, he was back in top 100, and they were just, I remember talking with the Miami assistants just saying he is going to be an absolute star, and they were absolutely right on that.
One of those Miami assistants may now be a sitting head coach who may now be sitting next to us tomorrow. We'll have to see about that. We'll be getting some first-hand perspective. All right, now we are going to, again, turn the page a little bit. We want to talk about X factors for each team. I mentioned Andre Jackson for UConn. To me, he is the ultimate X factor because he's an elite-level athlete. He's a connector. When he gets loose in transition and he can explode for one of those big dunks, it is worth a whole lot more than 2 points because it can just immediately change the momentum of a game. He's also on a team that lacks a prototypical point guard. He is the one who is the primary facilitator. Now, it's been really interesting in this NCAA tournament because there have been at least 2 different teams that have just refused to guard him outside the paint. I mean, they are just backing up and daring him to shoot. So how does he handle that? How does he handle the pressure of the game? Because to me, UConn is a team. I talked about how they've been better when they are the hunter and not the hunted. This is a team that when they're playing with flow and when they're playing with rhythm, they're really, really good. Basically, when they're playing confident, they're really, really good. But I think Jackson really is the one who sets that mark. They feed off the energy level and the confidence that he provides. So to me, he is a major X factor. And Trav, you talked about it. Miami's going to get up and pressure these guys.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right, Ibas, I'm going to give you the floor here. The X factor for San Diego State. Who you got?
I'm going to go with, really it's interesting because we're talking about an entire team full of X factors, really with the way they play. But I go with Micah Parrish. They're not a team that's a particularly great jump shooting team. Now, Adam Seiko, a guard who's been there seemingly forever, he's almost 25 years old, will knock down some shots and is shooting at almost 50%, but as right at around a 36% three-point shooter. Parrish is their most reliable shooter, and they play such low possession games that they need somebody to make some shots from time to time. And he's the guy that can do them. He's the guy that if someone's going to go off and make 3, maybe even 4 threes in a game, he's going to be that guy. And they've needed that because, again, I'll get back to Matt Bradley is their only double.
And he was bad. Matt Bradley was bad in the Elite. I know you're like, but let's just call it like it is. He was bad.
Matt Bradley hasn't been bad in the Elite 8. He was bad in the Mountain West tournament. He's just on a bad run. I think it's been
2 points in the Elite 8.
It has been since December 31st since Matt Bradley last scored 20 points in a game.
Wow.
He only averages 12.5 per game, but he's the guy who can get them 25, 27. So in the absence of him returning to being able to do what it is that he can do, they need other guys, and that's where I think Parrish steps up. He's their three-point threat. He's going to draw some defenses, and he's going to really need to step up and have a big game if they want to move into the national championship game.
Now, here's an interesting note about Bradley. Bradley is in his second season at San Diego State. He came from Cal, where he averaged 18 points per game. So he's actually seen his scoring totals drop in each of the last 2 seasons. Now, I think a lot of that is because of pace of play. There's just less possessions with San Diego State because they grind you out so much on the defensive end of the floor. But he's this big power guard. He makes some shots, but it's kind of a funky-looking shot. It's a hard ball with a high release. So that's a really interesting dynamic for me.
Well, and here's the other thing, if we want to be frank about it, he's playing for a significantly better basketball program now that he made that move from Cal to San Diego State. And, the old adage goes, every bad team needs a leading scorer. So he was that guy at Cal, and now that he's here at San Diego State, he sacrificed some scoring a little bit, but he's a bull. He can play some defense too. Yeah. So he's still defended, and he's still doing things to help them win. But you put Parrish as that X factor because he's the three-point shooter. But if Radley gets hot, we're talking about a team that is a legitimate chance to win the national championship with everything else that they do.
All right, we are on the road in Houston, presented by Ford. We are Ford Tough. Travis Branham continuing to break stories over there. Speaking about getting hot, Nigel Pack. Does he have a bonus clause in his NIL where if he is he incentivized to come out and make 6 threes in this game? He's your X factor for Miami. What could go good or bad?
He could go cold.
Yeah.
That's going to be really bad for Miami. We've seen it happen this year, but to what you were saying, he's been red hot in March. So if he's making shots, that's an absolute huge weapon and asset for this Miami team. But in this game, Norchad Omier, we have to keep going back to him. He's also an X factor. You have this many weapons, and when you're going up against a guy like Adama Sanogo, he has to play well. He can't get in foul trouble.
And Klingon. He's not going to get a break.
No chance.
Yeah.
And so if they're forced to go small, they're already small.
Right.
But if they're forced to go small, UConn's just going to absolutely dominate the paint. So you're going to have Nigel Pack making those shots, but you're also going to have Norchad Omier playing all 40 minutes.
So it's interesting because I think when they go small, one of the things that I'm curious to see is how does UConn's ball screen defense hold up? Because when they force Klingon or Sanogo moves his feet almost, I think, better than most people realize. But when they pull those guys out to the perimeter and force them to guard, because Miami will go 4 out to start, and then they'll go 5 out at stretches. And how did the UConn bigs respond to that? That, to me, is one of the major X factors in this game. All right, FAU, you got an X factor for FAU, boss?
Yeah, I do. They've got a guy who's been around campus for a while. They had to fight a really tough eligibility battle to get him back for 6th year, and that's Michael Forrest.
Who's older, Michael Forrest or Nate Mensa?
Or Adam Seiko might be all their dads. But Michael Forrest, this guy, he's an Energizer bunny. He's another who he stepped up and hit big-time free throws against Kansas State late in the game after not having the biggest game. He's over 1,600 points in his career. That's second all-time in a Florida Atlantic uniform. This guy is the heart and soul of this thing. He's the guy who's seen them come from the very bottom all the way up to the top, to the Final Four on the precipice of a national championship right now. And I think you can't put a value on that type of experience in a guy, right? And also that type of dedication to the program. Like this it means a lot to everybody. For a kid like this who's been on the ground floor, is from the area, it means something a little bit extra, and he just provides energy. He can step up and score when they need him. He can make some plays, and he's just kind of that steadying ship that I think he's that guy that's that X factor for them, whether it's going to be making a key pass in a critical moment, whether it's going to be stepping up and hitting a free throw. I think he's going to be that guy who makes the difference for them.
They're playing with house money. There's no pressure on them. UConn, I think, has got the pressure right now, but I think Miami and even San Diego State, to a lesser extent, they find themselves with the pressure of suddenly having an opportunity to win an NCAA tournament. Florida Atlantic doesn't have any. Dusty May just got a 10-year contract extension. Everybody's happy in the May household. All right, let's try and wrap up these conversations as we look at these 4 teams. Let's collectively talk about the strengths and weaknesses of each one. Travis, I'll start with you with Miami. We've broken this down a little bit, but go a little deeper, if you will, and what are the core competencies, if you will, of this Hurricane team, other than Jim Laranaga's dancing?
Yeah, just as we were saying earlier, the fact that they just go out and hoop, it can come as a detriment to the team.
Right.
So decision-making has been spotty throughout the course of the year. So that is absolutely something that we're going to be watching. If Isaiah Wong, Nigel Pack take care of the basketball, they don't have the best defense. While they do ball pressure you, they're not the most disciplined. They will take risks. They will take gambles. So if UConn stays disciplined on that end, they're going to be able to take advantage of them. And then also we've mentioned again the size differential.
Yeah, in the backcourt too. When you were talking about Nigel Pack, I think that's going to be interesting.
He's a 6'1" shooting guard.
Yeah,
he's not.
And he plays
he's
the
not a point.
Yeah,
he's not a point guard. Isaiah Wong is going to be the guy that's going to have to be trusted to really make the decisions for this team, especially again in crunch time. So those are the two things that have specifically the decision making has always shown up, but in this game, height differential and the size that UConn possesses that Miami doesn't is also going to play a big factor.
1 through 5, couldn't agree more. All right, Ibas, strengths and weaknesses, San Diego State.
The strength is their strength, right? This is a bunch of rocked up, solid dudes who have been in the weight room, who embrace toughness, who embrace physical contact. That that toughness, and they're connected. They got experience. They
got some swag.
They got a lot. Yeah, they got a lot of 4th, 5th, 6th-year guys. They're gonna get after it. Now they don't have a lot of depth. Well, they do have this. Sorry, but the one thing that they do that I don't think anyone else in this tournament does, you don't see many else really in the country. Period. Their ability to truly switch 1 through 5 makes them special on the defensive end, because it is almost impossible to catch them in a mismatch. They're tough. They're smart.
Even with Mensah out there, do they switch Mensah?
Yes, they switch. In fact, Mensah, there's not a better perimeter switching big man in the country. Talk to coaches in the Mountain West. That guy strikes fear in them. That not only can he switch the perimeter, but he can get back and protect the rim for them. Yeah. And even if you catch, say, a Lamont Butler in a situation where he's matched up with a big in the low post, he's such a warrior, and they're so quick to react and help and then recover that they're going to find a way to make things done, and they squeeze the life out of you, and they force you into bad shots. And now, while they don't put up a lot of points, they take pretty smart shots, and with their defense, they're always able to stay in a game because it's never going to get into a true shootout type situation.
Let's say they win. Here's my question on them. If you're playing Miami or UConn, they're going to score. And can San Diego State score? Because they've won it with defense so far. So my question with them is, like, when you got to win with offense, do you have that in you? I think that's, if we're talking about winning the doubleheader here this weekend, that's my question for them. All right, UConn, I think, again, we've talked about this, but my big thing with UConn is the number of ways in which they can beat you. They can beat you inside with Klingon and Sanogo. They can beat you from behind the three-point line with Hawkins and Caravan and plenty of others. They can beat you with their pressure. They can beat you in transition. This is, to me, is one of the most versatile basketball teams in the country. They are obviously incredibly hot right now. They are just dominating people in what I thought 2 weeks ago was the toughest bracket in this NCAA tournament. And what they did in all 4 games, including what they did to Gonzaga with Drew Timme, was nothing less than dominant. Now, again, to me, the Achilles heel of this team is their ability to handle defensive pressure. You got to look at the point differential right there, and as you can see, it's not close in terms of how UConn has been so successful so far. And again, in my mind, against maybe the toughest slate to get here. But the big question, we know Miami's going to pressure them defensively. We know they're going to get into their guards. We know they're going to make them handle and pass the ball against pressure. How does UConn respond to that? Do they turn the ball over? Does that push them out of their sets? Are they able to get Sanogo and Klingon the ball in that prime real estate where they can score and command a double team? That all starts with their ability to handle pressure. So I think, to me, that is certainly something to keep an eye on. All right, FAU, Trav, I'm going to start with you. Major strengths and weaknesses for this team?
Just experience.
Certainly the weakness, yeah.
Oh, so you said strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah. What do you got?
So strength.
All right.
Just the fact that they have all these guys that have been there under Dusty May for all these years. To me, that has been the biggest reason that they are, to me, in this point. They were a top 25 all year, top 25 team all year long. So the fact that you have that age experience, these guys are so familiar with each other. That's something that Miami can't really say. It's something UConn can't necessarily say. So the fact that they have this bond and this togetherness, if you will, I think that could be something that really, when adversity hits, because it always does in these games, that they really come together.
All right, you are watching 247 Sports on the road in Houston, presented by Ford, built Ford tough. Now we are going to talk about, and this has been a trendy subject in the national media, is UConn a blue blood? Now, I admittedly, disclaimer, am an alum, so I'm not going to start with this one. But Ibas, he lives very close to Kansas. They're often known as a blue blood. They won last year. So I'm going to give you the first crack at this one. Is UConn a blue blood, and should they be considered one?
I think it's about time we get real serious about the discussion. In fact, I wrote an article about it this week. Since they broke through to the Final Four in 1999 and won their first national championship, they had already made 3 Elite Eight runs during the 90s under Jim Calhoun. Since then, this is now their 6th Final Four, and if they win a title, that's 5 national championships in just under 25 years. There's nobody out there doing that. The traditional blue bloods, Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, UCLA, North Carolina, Indiana. UCLA has been to 4 or 5 Final Fours since then. Kansas, Duke, North Carolina, multiple titles in that time span. Indiana's kind of running a little bit behind those things. But, if titles matter, I think we need to talk about what have teams done in the last 25 years, not what did they do during the entirety of the Cold War, right? Like, I really don't care what happened at this point in 1960. Yes, history matters. It matters a lot. So I'm not saying
was it 1987? We just saw that graphic.
I'm saying you don't have to throw
Bobby Knight's now walking through that door.
You don't have to throw out the guys. You know what I mean? You don't have to throw out people. I think blue blood is blue blood. And they need to be there, and we need to honor that tradition and history. But I guess the term that everyone likes to use is what, new bloods, right? Well, at a minimum, UConn is at the top of the pack for the new bloods because it hasn't just been one coach.
No.
Jim Calhoun won a title. Kevin Ollie won a title. Hurley's got them knocking on the door of one. They've done it in multiple conferences. They've done it as favorites. They've done it as underdogs. NBA players, 25 NBA players in that span. They check all the boxes. They've got the funding. They've got a rabid fan base. And, if there's anybody who's got a strong body of work for this, it's UConn. And I think if they win the title, there's no way but to call them a blue blood at this point.
All right. Now, you were very close to Kansas. Travis lives in the state of Kentucky. There's some people that are passionate about the term blue blood in the state of Kentucky. So, Trav, how would the people in Kentucky feel about calling UConn a blue blood?
I'm all for it. They absolutely are deserving of it, if you ask me. And this may rile some people up, but you can make a case that they should be subbed in for Indiana. Indiana has not been
the Indiana hate is real here.
People are going to say that now just because I'm from Kentucky. Yeah. But, you look at the recent track record that Bossy just laid out for us. UConn has been as good and consistent of a program just about as anybody else in the across the entire national landscape. So to me, they're absolutely deserving. And the way that Indiana has been over the last decade, 15, 20 years, you could absolutely make a case that they're deserving of that spot.
All right, now the landscape in college basketball is changing, or I think what I should say is has changed, and people are just starting to realize it and pay attention. You heard Mick Cronin's comments about NIL earlier this week about how everything is different, and we got to start to account for it. I think people have accounted for it. We talked about Miami and how they've gotten here, but between the transfer portal, between NIL, between OTE and G League Ignite starting to impact some of the potential one and done, or I shouldn't say start, I should say continuing to impact some of the high level college talent. This is a vastly different game than it was 5 years ago. And the other major factor in this is the fact that COVID season, everybody got their year of eligibility back. So this is really changed the way college coaches can adapt to roster construction in this day and age. So, Ibas, I'm going to start with you because you've been doing this longer than any of us. I mean, the state of the game right now, you know what, I'm going to make this open-ended because I'm going to let you take it where you want, just in terms of where we're at right now relative to what you've seen over the years.
We're definitely in a weird space as we're navigating the transfer portal and these last couple guys. I think there's one more class of players that's going to have this extra COVID year. I think this is the guys who came in for that out of the 2019. Yeah, I think it's the guys who came out of the 2019 class. So 2023 would be their natural senior year.
Yep.
So those guys are the ones with the extra COVID year still under their belt, right? It's changed things because college coaches talk all the time about how they want to get older, right? And they strive to be older. Well, this has allowed them to do that, but it's also been at the expense over these last couple of years of young players. We haven't seen young players producing quite like we've expected them to play. Young players are coming in now also having had their impact as high school and junior high players affected by COVID and not being able to get into the gym as much as they want. So it's a tangled web that's all weaving together, and it's got us in this funky space right now that we're adapting to, that coaches are adapting to. it's going to be interesting to see that once we get out of this era with these COVID guys, and this Final Four isn't quite as impacted. There's a few guys that are using that extra COVID year, and we got a few 6-year guys in there, the Adam Seikos of the world. But, you know, it has helped teams stay older, and it's really kept the transfer portal booming like it's never been booming before, because there's a lot of guys in there that would not have had eligibility otherwise. Right. So I think what it's done is it's provided a deeper pool of experience for coaches to choose from, and they've really been leaning on that crutch right now. But in a couple years, the ability to lean on that and use that extra year is going to be gone, and they're going to have to go back to recruiting high school players a little bit harder than they can and developing those guys a little bit more. And I think we're going to have to see another shift in coaching styles and what we're trying to do with these guys in a couple years because of these COVID years.
So, you know, two thoughts about that. One, it makes me think of UConn. Jordan Hawkins, Adamo Sanogo, Andre Jackson, Donovan Klingen, Alex Caravan, all original recruits out of the high school portal. Now, granted, they've got Tristan Newton, Joey California, because I refuse to call him by his real name, Naheem Aline. Those guys were transfers, so they've supplemented their rosters with transfers. But Danny Hurley has been very outspoken about how he doesn't believe in building rosters through transfer portals. He wants to do it the old-fashioned way. Now, I think the thing that the transfer portal has done, we saw the coaching carousel really spin at full speed this offseason. And in my mind, one of the implications of the transfer portal is the fact that fan bases expect you to be able to flip the script even faster than before. So, Trav, like for example, we said you live in Kentucky. Louisville, that's a program that, you know, obviously struggled year one under Kenny Payne, but the expectation is, hey, you better get it right year two, because you can flip this, and we're seeing them do it. So this question isn't specific to Louisville, but just in general, I think coaches have less time than ever, and this has never been a business that had a whole lot of long-term job security.
Yeah, Kevin Willard, I think, has kind of set the bar high in that regard, taking over at Maryland, going to the NCAA tournament, get a win already this year. And honestly, Louisville even had a shot at getting him, former Louisville assistant coach. But yeah, the leash has never been shorter. Fans have never been more impatient. And honestly, it's pretty understandable with the ability to go rebuild a team so quickly in the portal, especially with what we saw out of Kansas State. And obviously we've talked about, it's been widely talked about, there's not a single McDonald's All-American. So does Youth even win anymore? What is that going to look like for these teams? Again, being from Kentucky, Kentucky's bringing in another loaded freshman class that they're going to be completely reliant upon next year. Will that translate to wins at the end of the day?
Well, that's a good – all right, so let's go down that road. Can you win with a team full of one-and-dones this year? I've always had this contention, and this is before kind of all the recent changes in the landscape of college basketball. My contention was that in order to win at the highest level nationally with the team built around one-and-dones, you needed two things to happen. One, you needed it to be a very good high school class, and two, you needed to have almost domination at the top of this high school class. Now, this particular high school class is not very good. I'll just say it plainly. This is not a particularly good class. Kentucky has had something close to dominant recruiting efforts within this class. But again, I think you need to check both of those boxes to be able to, you know, win at the highest level. And I don't think this high school class was going to generate that for anybody. But I guess coupled by NIL, can you supplement your high school kids almost in the way Danny Hurley has to build a national championship contender sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I think you can, and I think a few things with the transfer portal. You know, I'm in Kansas, so I'm gonna reference a couple teams here. We look at what Jerome Tang did at Kansas State. He went from last in the Big 12 to seconds, you know, projected last in the Big 12 to seconds away from making the Final Four. Flipped that program around through Marquise Noel just turning into a total, you know, dude, and by also getting guys out of the transfer portal, namely Keontae Johnson. I guess he was a junior college player, but Naquan Tomlin was another big piece. But transfers. But going to your point about the roster construction, if you look at the Kansas National Championship team from last year, it's kind of similar to what UConn's got going on right now. You had Christian Brown, Ochai Agbaji, David McCormick, Jalen Wilson, guys who've been in the program for a while. You supplement that with some high-level freshmen coming in, and you also get a guy like Remy Martin, a transfer from Arizona State, who provided that extra little bit of juice that they needed to get in. But the bigger point here to me is The one-and-done era, in my opinion, began with the class of 2006. That was the first class. That was Kevin Durant's class. Greg Oden, they couldn't go straight to the NBA. They had to go to college for at least a year, right? So that began the beginning of the one-and-done era, in my opinion. Now, of course, there were one-and-dones before that. But since the beginning of that era, there's been 2 teams that win a national championship using those one-and-done guys. It's been Kentucky in 2012, where they had a transcendent freshman talent in Anthony Davis, and then Duke did it in 2015. But they both, on top of those freshman talents, they had a couple of veterans that were able to help them win those titles those years. So it's got to be a mix. I think relying on one-and-done talent, it's great to win recruiting rankings. It's great to maybe win a conference title. It's great to maybe make Elite Eight, occasionally a Final Four. But if you want to consistently compete for national championships, one and done is not the way to go, and I don't think it's ever been the way to go. And I also think it's been overrated that there's really only been a couple teams relying exclusively on one and done, being Duke and Kentucky. Now, it worked that they each got a championship, but I think a lot of their fans might say we should have won more during those years if we could have maybe kept a couple guys around. You know, you look, North Carolina's won 3 in that time, and they've done it without the one and done guys. Kansas has won a couple national championships without relying on one and done guys, but that mix. So it goes back to your greater point, you know. One and done, I just don't think is or was the way to get things done.
Trav, I saw you perk up over there. What do you got?
I did perk up. I will say, we say it all the time, not all classes are created equal. So next year we don't anticipate, again, Kentucky is the #1 class coming in. We don't anticipate that class having the same impact as the John Wall year. That class was absolutely spectacular and could have won a national championship. Now, in 2 years from now, I think we can make an argument against that and say, if you get Cameron Boozer, you get Cooper Flagg. These are players that can take you to a national championship. That is a one and done type of class that can do that to you. So I think it's just going to be dependent upon year. And honestly, to rebut everything that we kind of just said, Duke this year looked like they could have gone in and won a national championship behind all freshmen for the most part. Tyrese Proctor, Mark Mitchell, Kyle Filipowski, Derek Lively, his growth. Behind one returner, and that was Jeremy Roach. You also had Jalen Blakes, but Jeremy Roach was the only guy who contributed the year prior. So by the end of the year, this Duke team entering March, they were the hottest team in the country and just got bulldozed, literally bulldozed by a Tennessee basketball team and Mark Mitchell, who went out 5 minutes prior to the game.
All right, we are on the road in Houston, as you can see in the background. We are presented by Ford. We are made Ford tough. At least those guys are. You talked about Duke. Team full of not just high-priority freshmen, but McDonald's All-Americans. Now, we alluded to this, and I think this is all part of the same conversation, but there's no McDonald's All-Americans here in Houston this weekend. Actually, the McDonald's All-American game was in Houston about 6 days ago. These guys have been here for like 10 straight days in Houston. What do we make out of that there are no McDonald's All-Americans here? And let me start with a hypothesis. If we went back and started this tournament over again, is there any way, like in my mind, it's less than 1 in 100 that we'd come down to these 4 teams once again. So, like, to me, that's the beauty of the NCAA tournament, is like the unpredictable scenarios in the one and done equation. But it makes these improbable scenarios sometimes come to life, and I think that's what's happened this year. So a lot of people want to talk about the fact that there are no McDonald's All-Americans here. Ebas, what do you make of that?
I don't really make all that much of it, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, if it starts happening on a regular basis, then maybe it's a little bit something that we talk about more, but it's an anomaly right now. It's a one-time in 40-year type thing. You know, we're talking
it's the
about
outlier.
We're
it's not
talking since
representative.
you know, going back to 1979 with Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. You know, we've had McDonald's All-American. Like, I'm not sure Bird was, but Magic Johnson definitely was. We've had McDonald's All-Americans in the Final Four. We've had McDonald's All-Americans on winning teams. So I'm not too concerned about it if you're into that. Like, I think it's still a big piece because you still want the best freshman talent you can have. And while being a McDonald's All-American isn't a be-all, end-all in terms of being a great freshman, it is a pretty good indicator by large about what to expect out of a freshman. And I would be surprised if we're back here next year and there's not one. You know, UConn's got one on the way. And
Stephen Castle,
thank you, Stephen Castle. So, you know, maybe we can count him because he's been in town this week with the McDonald's All-American game. But I don't think it's a big deal personally.
And to me, it all plays into the same discussion about, you know, the high-profile freshmen. I think the other thing that's relevant in all this is that the high-profile freshmen are oftentimes the best NBA prospects and not necessarily the best college players. It's one of the interesting kind of dynamics or subtleties, if you will, in recruiting coverage and certainly in evaluating, is that it depends on what you're evaluating for. Are you evaluating for who's going to be the best NBA prospect, which I think is probably at the top of our criteria, but I don't think it's necessarily at the top of a college coach's criteria. It may also be at the top of the McDonald's All-American criteria. So I think you're going to see a much stronger alignment between McDonald's All-Americans and June's NBA draft, whereas what you're seeing here is a correlation between age and experience.
Hey, speaking of one and dones and McDonald's All-Americans and evaluating for the NBA draft, if we can break in with another bit of news that just came out.
There we go.
Kansas freshman Grady Dick
Yeah.
is declared for the draft. There's that one and done guy who
Yep.
he was a good college freshman, very good college freshman, but another guy who it's turning out might have been a better NBA prospect than a college basketball prospect. What kind of impact do you think this makes for this Kansas team that's already losing Jalen Wilson, Kevin McCullough? How big of a blow is this for them?
I think this is something that they have planned for all year long. I think the expectation that Grady Dick, I think Grady Dick is someone that if he had a disappointing freshman season could have been talked into a sophomore campaign. To be candid, regardless of how, the season ended up, I thought Grady had a really good freshman campaign. And until Jordan Hawkins did what he did in the last few weeks, I think there was a case to be made that Grady Dick was the best shooter in the NBA draft. Right now, I'm taking Jordan Hawkins in that category. But Grady Dick has come in. He's got really good positional size on the wing. He's shown that he can impact winning right away. And I think one of the other things that's been interesting, he doesn't have any fear in him. So, talking to some of those Kansas coaches during the season, they said, hey, listen, we walked into Mizzou. Those fans are nuts. They're calling us things you wouldn't believe. And he's laughing. Like, he loves it. So I think that characteristic of not being scared by the moment has been really good for him. So I don't think this is I think this is something Kansas was expecting. And I think that, given what they did in the portal last year, I would expect them to have another strong portal campaign. But after you interject, I will defer to the czar of the portal for that.
Well, it's funny. You mentioned that win at Missouri, a funny story. Grady Dick, it's got a little bit of troll on him. After winning at Mizzou, he went out and bought a Bengal cat with stripes and everything, and that's how he celebrated the win. He's like, I'm going to go buy a cat and kind of troll these guys. He's a different dude. Now, we talk about the portal and stuff, but a guy who's not going into the portal, a guy that you knew really well from his time at Kentucky, Bryce Hopkins is decided to come back to Providence as we talk about some more breaking news, if you don't mind me breaking things up a little bit. Travis, Kimmy English, how big of a win is this for him to get Bryce Hopkins back?
It's absolutely huge, and it's not only going to impact Kim English, but it's the new NCAA rule that we have seen reports of, essentially saying if you are going to be a two-time transfer, getting that waiver, even with the coaching change, is going to be next to impossible. So that waiver really plays into the hands of Kim English. But absolutely huge news. They're also getting back Devin Carter, another transfer out of South Carolina. Father was a former NBA player. So that is two high-impact guys coming back to Providence. So Friar fans should absolutely be celebrating today. So now it's just going to be, what do they go after next? And I will say this is something we can discuss maybe later or come back to. But does that rule almost make transfers more valuable than high school players? If you bring out a high school player now, they have the option to leave at any time and have no penalty. But now you bring in a transfer, maybe that also plays a little risk into you, because they can't, if they were to transfer, they now have to sit out. So you're more likely to have retention by taking the transfers now than you would a high school player.
So here's the thing. We hear they're going to have to transfer. And let's be clear. The new interpretation, as it has been publicized, is that a second-time transfer will no longer be able to play right away. Now, we saw plenty of two-time transfers be able to play right away in this college basketball season. So this is an attempt to break the short-term precedent. Interesting case study to watch. Andre Curbelo started his career at Illinois, went to St. John's last year. He is currently in the portal. He is a two-time transfer. If he gets a waiver to play right away, now you have an extended precedent, and we'll see if that catches on and causes a copycat effect. But as it relates to programs like Providence, there's two ways right now to really rebuild a roster quickly. We talked about NIL, Miami being the obvious example of that. You go to the portal, you got salary cap behind you, and listen, not saying anything that hasn't already been on Twitter. It's very obvious how this roster was built. But Ed Cooley left the Providence situation where he doesn't have the same level of NIL, where he didn't have the same level of NIL backing. I think coaches, we talked about this in College Basketball Recruiting Weekly, I think coaches are taking NIL into consideration more so than the general public could possibly know when they're picking their next jobs, when they're deciding whether they want to stay or when they want to go. But that new interpretation, if you have a roster that's already been built on transfers and you know they can't go, it gives you an opportunity to potentially win right away. And so that's what I think Kim English got. So there's really two different avenues right now, portal related. You go somewhere where you have NIL backing and you know you can try and flip it right away, as we've talked about, or you go somewhere where they've already done the recruiting out of the portal, and now you know you have a very strong chance to retain them because of that recent NCAA interpretation.
So let me ask you one last question about Providence. How do their fans blame Ed Cooley for Carter and Hopkins coming back?
You trying to get me trolled on Twitter? You trying to get me? I'm going to be on Goodman and Barstool. Yeah, I want no part of this.
El Presidente is going to be coming after you
next. I want
next.
no part of this. I don't know. I mean, here's the reality, and this is what I said, and this isn't specific to Providence, but you got to have a collective if you want to win at the highest level. If you had 10 coaches right here, and I know polling coaches became a big thing in that debate, but if you had 10 coaches right here, they would all tell you that your chances of winning at the highest level come in correlation to a number of variables, but nothing is more important right now than NIL in the strength of your collective. It's not to say you can't do it, because I can see the Twitter trolls right now. Oh, how did FAU get there? Well, it's a one-off thing. So if they played it 100 more times, they might not do it. And the point is, what is the probability? Not that you can't win a one-off game. I don't think Princeton's NIL was great either. But the point is that to get here, to have sustainable excellence at the highest level nationally in the current landscape of college basketball, the perception is you can't do it without a very strong collective, meaning NIL commitment.
Yeah, absolutely. These guys now, in talking to several coaches who have, if you talk to a coach who's trying to get a player out of the portal, they're not going to tell you what the collective can get that guy unless you're really, really close with them. But if you have friends who have players in the portal that people are coming to take, those kids are reporting back to them, hey, I talked to this school. They offered me this. I talked to another school. They offered me that. And so it's getting more and more out there. Now I guess the things that we're going to have to see, and I know we got a special guest coming on soon, the thing we're going to have to see as we move on is it's going to come to which collectives are coming through on these dollars and which aren't. But that's an entire discussion for another day.
That is another whole nother can of worms. All right. Now we're going to have our first special guest here of the weekend, and that is Florida Atlantic assistant coach Kyle Church joining us by Skype. Coach, thanks so much for coming in with us.
Thanks for having me, guys. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. Now, Ebas is the resident FAU fan. He's got the warm-up shorts on underneath the table. I know you can't see it, so we're going to allow him to ask the first question here. And if he's too much of a homer, Brandon will just tackle him and hit him on the golf course.
This is going to be a real outside-the-box question, but how does it feel, man? Like, what are the emotions that are going through your mind, not only after Michael Forrest makes those free throws down the stretch, but right now that you're here and it's real?
It feels surreal. I've grown up around college basketball my whole life, and been to several Final Fours. Never as a participant, was very close when I was at the University of Florida, but just to be here and be in the fight and with our guys and with the rest of our staff is just be able to keep playing. And I just never want the season to end. Our guys, our staff is so special, and all the stuff the NCAA, the city of Houston, our administration has done to make this a special experience has been really surreal, and we couldn't be more thankful.
Hey, Coach, Travis Branham here. Came out recently, the report just talking about the resources essentially that you guys inherited when you guys took this job. So I'm just curious, when you guys got hired in at Florida Atlantic, what was your all's vision? How did you guys kind of envision this program going and the steps you took that ultimately has gotten you to this point?
For sure. So, Travis, I came with Dusty May when he got the job 5 years ago now. We were both on staff at Florida. I was in the ops spot. And so I had the pleasure of seeing this thing kind of get built from the ground up. Obviously, we inherited a program that was struggling a little bit. They didn't, had a few losing seasons, and especially moving into Conference USA, the whole program was in a tough spot. And Coach May, we just took our gloves off and went to work, and him and the rest of the staff and the players, and he had a vision. We knew we could win. Now, I'll be lying if I thought the first day we got there we'd be in the Final Four in 5 years, but we knew we could build something special. He had a belief the whole time, and he just went step by step. We got a little bit better every year. Every year, guys got more buy-in. The administration, the community, every year got a little bit better. And then for whatever reason, this off season, this summer, everything came together, and it was like, this is going to be special. And once again, I didn't know to this degree, but just to see it from where it was when Mike Forrest committed to us 5 years ago to where it is now is just an absolute dream come true, even further than I thought.
Coach, as we look forward to tomorrow's matchup with San Diego State, obviously, we've been on here talking about their physicality, their defense, the grinded out kind of way in which they play. What are going to be some of the most important keys for you guys to bring tomorrow night?
Well, you mentioned at the start the physicality. I mean, they're tough. They're grown men, absolute grown men. They played a lot of college basketball. Listening to their interviews, I mean, they present themselves like grown men. They play like grown men. So we got our hands full. But with our league gets us prepared. We've seen the success our league's had, North Texas in particular with their size and physicality, UAB with their size and physicality, Middle Tennessee is big and athletic. Obviously, Tennessee is a very similar type team that really thrives on physicality. We talked about it with the guys. If it's going to be a weightlifting contest, or if we try to wrestle them, then we're going to be in trouble. But we do have speed and quickness, and we got a whole lot of heart. And we're really proud of that. And it'll be a heck of a ball game. I'd be shocked if it wasn't very, very close.
Coach, we've been speculating all day and talking about our opinions on how you guys built this thing and what you guys did to put this all together. But when you came in, the recruiting vision, what was it? Because you guys still have a lot of guys that are due to come back next year. But you have a lot of guys that you recruited and have been a part of this from the ground up, and you've got some transfers, but not as many. But what has it been that you guys have looked for in your players when out on the recruiting trail? And what do you think is the common trait that all these guys share that has allowed them to do what they're doing?
Yeah, really good questions. When we first got here, we ended up having 10 scholarships to fill. So that first year, we were just taking anybody we could get, anybody that wanted to be an FAU owl. We were trying to field a team, and at that point, the immediate eligibility was not a thing. You still had to sit out a year. So we were looking at grad transfers, different things like that, the first couple years that could play right away, and we could put together a decent team. And we talked about the first couple years just looking to earn respect. We're not going to go to the Final Four and compete for conference championship year one, but we can earn respect with how we play. And as we got better, our guys got closer. We probably got better as coaches, the whole nine. As the whole program developed, we really noticed the ones that are successful are the ones that love basketball. If you know anything about Dusty May, he is the definition of a basketball junkie. He cannot get enough morning, noon, night. He is basketball 24/7. European League, G League, NBA, middle school. I bet you name it, he follows it, and so we found out the guys that love basketball, really love it, and really love to work, are the ones that are going to be successful, and that's no different than in life or other professions, but it just worked best with us. And this group is just like him. They're competitive. They love hoops. We got to kick them out of the gym. We got to wrestle them apart in practice. I mean, they're unbelievable to work with, and it's just been a perfect match of head coaching personality, staff personality, player personalities, and we couldn't be more proud of them.
While we're sitting here talking about how you guys built this roster, tell us a little bit about John L. Davis. He's had some big moments this March. What does he mean to this team?
Man, he's really special. He's a really special player. He's got an unbelievable ability to handle the ball and get where he wants to get to on the court. Any coach knows that's a special gift when you can get the ball anywhere on the court. And then his decision making once he's gotten there has separated him this year. That's where he's made the biggest growth. We saw it towards the end of last year, and then in the spring and summer workouts, we were telling friends, anybody that listened, that Nelly, that we call Janelle Nelly, that he's about to take off. He's gonna have a huge year, and everything's kind of came together. I mean, and his teammates are unbelievable with him. He's figuring out how to kind of evolve into this star kind of role while getting everybody involved and figuring out when to be aggressive for himself. And it's his development's been really special, and really all of them have. I mean, just Elijah Martin, Vlad. I go down the BJ Greenlee's been unbelievable this tournament. Nick Boyd, having him back from injury. Giancarlo Rosado, he was huge for us against Memphis. Brandon Weatherspoon. I mean, just one guy after another have just been unbelievable. And their unselfishness is what really makes a difference.
One more question on Janelle. How did you find this guy out of the state of Indiana? Is that just ties going back there from coach, or what brought him to your guys' attention that made you guys realize this is our guy? For sure.
So it was a former assistant, Akeem Misting, I believe, had recruited a guy out of 21st Century High School in Gary, Indiana. And Nelly was a younger player on that team. I want to say either a freshman or sophomore. And Akeem kind of always kept tabs on him. Was like, this guy's got a chance to be a really special player. Or either year one or year two, he took Coach May up there to see him and was like, hey, this is Coach May came back and said, man, this is the one. He's got all league potential. He loves to compete. This could be a great fit, and Akeem and Coach May, I think he came and visited the spring of his junior year. I think they first allowed the junior official visits. He came spring of his junior year. He looked like a baby, he was so young, and his family had a great time, and he loved South Florida, and they were kind of wanting to get away and experience new things, and they really trusted Akeem and Dusty, and we followed him all summer, and he was playing with the Indy Heat and the EYBL. I remember watching him in Augusta, and I remember very specifically remember calling Akeem after a game and telling him, like, if we can get him and Big Rosado, then we're gonna have a special recruiting class. Those two were both playing on EYBL in Augusta, and I was like, man, we got something special here. It was cool because in his high school days with his high school team, he averaged 35, maybe even close to 40 a game. He was one of the top players in the state of Indiana. When he played with the Indy Heat, where they had, I believe Nigel Pack was on the team. They had several, high major players. He just fit right in, just found a role, found a way to impact them, and he led them in rebounds as a 6'3" combo guard. He led a really good team in rebounds. So it was just cool. No matter what the situation was, he was going to impact winning.
That's interesting, because that Indy Heat team was one of the better ones in the EYBL that year. He probably was hiding in plain sight given some of the star power on that team. Coach, I want to ask you about what it's been like here in Houston specific to your schedule, because we know all 4 teams have the public practices, you've got media commitments. How are you trying to handle all of this and simultaneously prepare your kids to play the biggest game of their lives? What are you doing to keep things as normal as possible for them?
That's been a challenge, and coach reached out to several coaches that have played in the Final Four and won the Final Four, and they've all had the same thing to say about managing the time, managing the distractions, managing, all this stuff that's new is going to be a big part, a key to your success. And so, we've done the best we could. We've taken with stride. It's new to everybody here. We got a young staff, so this is all new to me too. But when it's time to do stuff like this and do the open practices, we just want to be ourselves. I think we want to show who we are as a program, and we love it, hate it, whatever you think of it. I think we got a really special thing here, just with the character and the people that surround the program, and it's cool that it gets to be on national display. I've had seen it the last 5 years, and now really the whole world does, and I think that's a really cool thing. And then figuring out time to watch film on San Diego State and fit a bunch of that stuff in is a challenge, but it's definitely one we're up for and happy to be taking on.
Last question for you, Coach. You guys have had a road to the Final Four that has been dealt with a lot of physicality. You guys had to face Tennessee. Dusty, in one of his post-game press conferences after that, Fairleigh Dickinson, he said, we got to learn the rules of rugby. My question is essentially, what did you guys do to prepare for that game, and how does that game prepare you for what's going to come tomorrow?
And so that actually goes way, way back before the season even started. As a matter of fact, we scrimmaged. We did one of the close scrimmages against UCF, and Taylor Hendricks, and who all know how good he is now, he scored a couple times on the block, as the 4-man. And we were playing small, just like we do now, basically 4 guards. And so it became really apparent, you play each other over and over again, so you don't really see it. But then when you play, a team with high major size and high major athleticism, you see, wow, like this is an area we can be exploited. And from that day forward, I don't know when we played them, probably October 20th or something, we knew that this was going to be something that could be a potential weakness that we need to address from day one in practice. And to our guys' credit, they said, all right, they fully bought in. They said, this is something we're going to need to fix if we're going to be an elite defensive team. And, they worked their butts off dealing with physicality. You look at the heights and weights of our guards, and you don't really think much of them, but I think teams feel them, and they feel the tenacity and the will to win, and they're going to do whatever it takes to win. And so, we've been dealing with it all year, and obviously San Diego State's unbelievable. They're so balanced, so well coached, so physical. But the good thing is we've faced it all year. Our guys are up for the challenge. I know that for sure.
Coach, we know you've got 1,000,001 commitments while you're here in Houston. You're simultaneously trying to win this game. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here. Good luck tomorrow night, and we hope you get a couple hours of sleep tonight.
I'm going to try. I appreciate it so much, guys. Thanks for all y'all do.
All right, thank you. All right, now, we talked a lot about tomorrow's doubleheader, but earlier in the show we had some breaking news. Travis, you broke it. Hunter Dickinson going back in the portal. I want to revisit that because a lot of names that go into the portal are expected. We're waiting for it to become public. It's happening behind the scenes. This, at least in my understanding, was not. This is not something that I think most college basketball insiders were expecting. And Trav, I will start with you. Is it too early to have a sense of where he might be looking at this point?
No, there is already some buzz going around while we're sitting here on the air. I just pointed out the fact that Kentucky actually brought him on an unofficial visit back when he was in high school, and that could be a team to watch we're under the expectation that they probably won't have Oscar Tshiebwe back next year, so that could open up a void for them to bring in another big man, and that would allow you. People say Aaron Bradshaw. Well, you can play Aaron Bradshaw at the 4. He's so big and he's so mobile that you can play him at the 4 and bring some real size and physicality, because that's something that Aaron Bradshaw lacks. So pointed that out, but there is some buzz potentially. Could he go back home to Georgetown and play for Ed Cooley? Played right down the street at DeMatha. So with everything that's going on, the surrounding excitement around Georgetown, can that lure a guy like Hunter Dickinson back home? So that's going to be something that I'm going to be looking at.
Is Syracuse being mentioned yet? Has anybody? Because to me, Syracuse is a team, just hired Brendan Strawn from Team Takeover. Hunter Dickinson, a Team Takeover product. They've already gotten J.J. Starling out of the portal. He wasn't a Team Takeover guy, but that to me would be another team to watch.
That was honestly my first thought when the news broke, and as we're sitting here on air, you lose track of that thought, but absolutely that's going to be something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, a couple different ones to watch.
Yeah, and, from everything we hear, Syracuse has a...
Siri is also joining us here today.
Siri's
live
us,
TV. She's not really sure where Hunter's going, but
from
she'll get back to us.
Everything we know, just in talking to kids, it sounds like Syracuse collective type deals have been pretty proactive, and that there's some things that compete with some things. So that's something to keep in mind as well, because, a collective is going to be interested in a guy that averaged 18.5 points, 9 rebounds a game, 56% from the field, to help start off a new era under Adrian Autry, and like you say, those ties with the new assistant coach and everything, it's something to think about.
And I'll add this too, because Hunter Dickinson, and we know this from having covered him, I talked about interviewing him on national TV. Hunter's a big personality, and he likes doing media stuff, and he spoke very openly about NIL this year. He spoke openly about how Michigan didn't have enough, how Juwan Howard was doing all he could, but how it was a challenge for the program moving forward. These are things that he talked about on the record. So for him to now go into the portal, and mind you, this is more than a year after he said that his sophomore season of college would be his last. He also said that on the record. So now he's changed his mind, and he's coming back in here. And it reminds me of Drew Timme last year. When Drew Timme said, hey, I'm coming back to Gonzaga, he didn't transfer, but he flat out said, I'm coming back because of NIL. And without NIL, you wouldn't have seen me come back. I don't think you would have seen Trace Jackson Davis or Oscar Tshiebwe or a ton of these other big guys come back. I also think it's representative of the fact that some of these big men are better fits in the college game than they are in today's NBA. So they can actually command a higher pay rate playing college basketball than they can professional basketball. Anybody have any thoughts?
I'll just say that you could still make, I don't think the European route gets enough love for how much money you can actually make over there, but you're absolutely right. You don't see the Oscar Tshiebwe's come back. You don't see a Tyrese Proctor at Duke, who could have been a late first rounder, potentially even Khalil Ware, who has a chance to make a lot of money next year and also improve his stock into a top 10 draft pick. Hunter Dickinson, being this old school big man, he can make a pretty penny next year, depending on where he ends up. So, more power to the players, absolutely.
All right, you are watching 247 Sports on the road in Houston, presented by Ford and built Ford Tough. Now, we are in Houston, so we've got to talk about this NCAA tournament and what we've seen. Now, I said earlier, I think you could play this tournament again 100 times, and you might not come up with these same Final Four teams. So I will present this question to you. Is this tournament, is this an outlier in terms of, what can happen in future years, or is this just representative of the parity we're going to see for the foreseeable future?
I'll start off. I think it's too early to tell, because we're a year off of Kansas and Villanova playing in one national semifinal game, and Duke and North Carolina playing in one semifinal game, and then Kansas beating North Carolina in the championship game.
Terrific point.
Now, yes, a lot has changed in the landscape over the last year, but not that much has changed just yet. So I think we need to let this play out and see a little bit more. But I do think that even last year throughout the season, we were starting to see a little bit more parity overall, even though we ended up with a blue-bloodish, heavy Final Four national championship game. But it's certainly something we're going to be monitoring. But I think there's been a lot of think pieces about what's wrong with college basketball, what's wrong with this, what's wrong with that. I think we're a little too early to be pushing the panic button on what needs to change, or is blue bloods dead. Let's see what happens for another year or two before we say, this is a sign of things to come for the future.
And your point about last year is really, really well taken. Trav, what's your take?
Well, I think there's nothing wrong with college basketball. I've actually had more people come up to me, more friends, just random people on the street, whatever, just kind of talk about how much fun this tournament has been. Yeah, it's not a super exciting Final Four, if you will. There's not the biggest fan bases, but this has been refreshing. This has been a lot of fun to watch. We've gotten to see Fairleigh Dickinson beat Purdue, who a lot of people expected just to run straight through the Final Four, having the best player in all of college basketball. Zach Edey won National Player of the Year this year. But at the same time, we can't jump to conclusions. Basketball is in a transitional phase right now, so there's been voids left open. You've had Mike Krzyzewski retire. You had Roy Williams retire. You had Jay Wright retire. All three teams that were in the Final Four last year, obviously Hubert Davis was a new head coach, but those are three teams that have lost legendary head coaches in the last 3 years. So it's just going to take some time to shuffle back out, and I think we'll find that balance again here in a couple of years.
All right, now we've talked a bit about the lower seeds making it. Jim Larrañaga is a coach who has now taken two different low seeds into the Final Four. So I will ask this to both of you, and it's a two-part question. What's his legacy now, and what's his legacy if he wins two more games?
I'll start off. I mean, his legacy is pretty strong. I mean, he's already been thought of as a high-level coach, right? As one of the game's innovative thinkers and a coach's coach type guy. But you always need that stamp of approval. Now, two Final Fours with multiple teams, especially one of them being a mid-major when he did it at George Mason. If you add a national championship to that, I mean, you probably got to start talking about him perhaps being a Hall of Fame kind of guy based off his entire body of work, don't you?
I would say he's absolutely a Hall of Fame coach. I mean, he took both of these teams to their first ever Final Four. I think it's the first time that's ever happened, right? No other head coach has ever taken two teams to a first-time Final Four, especially when you go back to a mid-major program like that. So, yeah, phenomenal head coach, awesome resume. I would expect to see him in the Hall of Fame someday.
All right, last question on the subject of Cinderellas. What is more likely, FAU turns into the next Butler, or San Diego State becomes a West Coast powerhouse? Now, let me be specific. By Butler, remember Brad Stevens made two different runs to the Final Four, never actually won it. But in so doing, he transformed a program from a mid-major program to a high-major program. We saw them jump up two different leagues. San Diego State being widely rumored to head to the Pac-12 next year. Does that help them sustain this level of success on an annual basis? So that's the scenario. Is FAU the next Butler, or is San Diego State the next West Coast power?
I'll start off. I'll say FAU is the next Butler, and here's why. San Diego State is already a West Coast powerhouse. You've got Arizona, you've got UCLA, you've got Gonzaga, and Oregon, but outside of those four, maybe USC, San Diego State is probably the next best basketball program on the West Coast right now, or has been the most consistent over the last 8, 10, 12 years, going back to the days of Kawhi Leonard, maybe even a little bit before, what Steve Fisher built, what Brian Dutcher inherited, what they're doing there. They've been a high major program operating in a supposed mid-major conference for well over a decade right now. So I answer Florida Atlantic because San Diego State, in my mind, has already achieved that status of a West Coast power basketball program.
I respect it. What do you got?
I would actually go the opposite route here. Because reason being, I don't think FAU will be holding on to Dusty May.
You're not buying that 10-year extension?
I mean, no.
No, he's not buying it.
I don't envision you keeping him long enough to establish yourself as a Butler program in San Diego State. To Bossy's point, they're absolutely a West Coast power already. They've won their conference tournament, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times in the last 20 years. To me, they're going to continue to establish that. This further establishes themselves as a West Coast power.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are on the road in Houston. We are presented by Ford, built Ford tough, and we're going to stay here for the next 3 days. In fact, tomorrow we will be back at 2 o'clock Eastern Time to preview the doubleheader, but we're also going to have a lot more guests than we did today. So it is going to be a long show with a lot of different guests. Looking forward to tomorrow night's games and talking about not only the way teams got there, but what we can expect in that doubleheader. Sunday, be 4 o'clock Eastern Time, we'll look back at the semifinals, then preview the Monday night's championship game. And then Monday, the pregame show is at 12 o'clock right here live on the 247 Sports channel. So again, Saturday, 2 p.m., Eastern Time, Sunday 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and Monday 12 noon. This is 247 Sports on the road in Houston, presented by Ford, built Ford tough. Thanks for watching.